That's always nice, isn't it? Hi, my name's Alex. I work for Callcredit, which I'll tell you a little bit more about in a minute. And I'm just going to talk a bit about a project that we did alongside Microsoft, where we took a relatively newly acquired suite of software, very much legacy, and we spent a few days in a hackathon sticking it into containers. And the way we did it was very far from perfect, but we've learned a lot. I'm going to tell you a bit about that. But it wasn't just about the tech. It was also an exercise that really helped to integrate our team with the newly acquired team and really build some bridges with them as well. Over to Marcus.
Yeah, so for those who don't know me, I'm Marcus Robinson, Technical Evangelist at Microsoft, focused around DevOps and containers here in the UK. But spend a lot of the time now, actually, rather than being at events and things which I used to, but actually going and working, doing these hacks with customers. So this was a project we did very early days of Windows containers. I was very nervous about actually even touching it at this point in time, but Callcredit were keen, so we went and did it. So this is the story.
Yeah, we were a bit too keen. We kind of twisted Marcus's arm to let us do this, so I'll tell you about it. Anyway, so Callcredit, we are one of the three main credit reference agencies in the UK. And so most of our core business, as you'd expect, is that we have lots of applications and massive, massive databases, all in environments that we manage. And our company is about delivering the right data to the right people at the right time, as fast as possible, and obviously very reliably as well. So we've become known for that. And we're a .NET house as well, very steadfastly so, though we've got one large set of software that runs on Linux. But more recently, we've actually acquired some what we call software products. And those are suites of products where some of them are delivered as software as a service, but a lot of them are on-prem installations. So, for example, I actually worked for one of those software houses before I joined my current team, and that product is called Decision Metrics, and that is a suite of software that takes information from all the different credit reference agencies, all the different fraud agencies, and brings it all together in one place for the customer, then puts it through some strategy as well. So it actually makes a full view credit decision about a customer for them. And as you can imagine, that's something that a lot of customers will want to have that installed on site so that they can also get it to query their own databases in very highly secure environments such as Lloyds Bank. But anyway, so we're going to talk about another software product, Numero. And so Callcredit loves DevOps. I've just told you about us being a .NET house. Of course, that's not a weird thing here at WinOps. But when we first turned up to lead DevOps 3 years ago and said, "Tell us about this, it sounds brilliant, absolutely brilliant. How can we do it?" And they said, what technologies do you use? Yeah, we're a Windows house, so a few giggles started at that point. And then when we started talking about all the regulation we're under, such as the Information Commissioner's Office, the Financial Conduct Authority, the PCI DSS, which is all about card data, they just said that you can't do this. You absolutely can't do this. So we set out to prove them wrong. And we mapped out where we were and where we wanted to get to. And those big data products that I was telling you about, we now actually have continuous delivery on all of them, and continuous integration on all of them. We don't have continuous deployment because the rules mean that we cannot actually just shove things through to live all the time. We've got to have separation of responsibilities and such like. But we always have the latest build ready to go live. So that's made us, we're very proud of that. And the team I belong to is, I'm afraid we've created a bit of an anti-pattern, is that we did actually create a DevOps team. We tried really hard not to call it that, but when you're the guys shouting about DevOps all the time, you end up being known as the DevOps team. So we have System Build, which I'm part of. It works very closely with the developers to help them with their continuous integration and their builds and thinking about the full route to live. And we have Platform Build, our sister team, who work more with the ops side. So yeah, we've actually created a double DevOps team. The walls between us are quite low, I'm pleased to say. So let me tell you a little bit about this software product that we decided to put into containers. Numero is based in Stockport, and it's an absolutely fantastic team. And what they do is they provide really, really innovative, state-of-the-art software, which it's got telephony, it's got email, it scans social networks, it does keyword searching, it does prioritization of enquiries, it talks with customers' own databases. And so it's a really, really fantastic solution, and the team are second to none, they really are. So they have worked over the past sort of 10 years to create this suite of software which gives this unified view of your customer experience. And it's used by lots and lots of different companies, very different companies in these various sort of categories. We've got some of the newer ones, such as Misguided. We've just done a lot of new development for them to make Numero compatible with their own website. And then we've got things like UK Visa, which, as you can imagine, incredibly secure. So secure that, of course, we can't see the environments to which we're going to be deploying the software. And, of course, they're very resistant to taking the new versions of the software at all for very understandable reasons. So I hope I'm building up a picture here where we've got some of these are taking this as a software as a service, so we have control over where that's deployed, and to some extent it's much easier for us to get the newest versions out to them. But the majority of them are taking it as an on-prem solution, and the complexity of that when you've got we'll show you the architecture in a minute, but we're trying to let them have the best software, but then, you know, the problems that are associated with deploying it into these mysterious environments is something we wanted to challenge. So Numero, it's Windows. It uses SQL database. It uses .NET on IIS and Java on Tomcat, and Node.js on IIS as well, and of course Nginx to coordinate it all. In terms of the tools they use to develop it, they use Visual Studio. They tend to check into Git. They now put everything into Git. It was a bit of a mishmash. They use Jenkins as their build agent, and they use Redmine for work planning, Grunt, and actually they use several different package managers, including Artifactory and NPM. But we're working on getting that down as well. So that's a bit of a picture of what Numero looks like at the moment. So we started our hack by having a planning day. We visited Numero's wonderful offices over in Stockport. And though some of us had actually had a chance to visit Numero before, for a lot of the people in that room, we hadn't met before. So it was actually a really, really good way of introducing ourselves, our system build team, and our platform build team to the Numero devs. So we had dev, test and architecture guys in the room. And so laying out the solution was really powerful. We weren't just analysing the structure and the technologies. A lot of the guys felt like they were seeing it in a new way. You see Chris there drawing up the architecture on the wall. And this is what he drew. I'm still learning about the Numero architecture, but just briefly, you can see that we've got a bit of a monolith there, core services, which was the original product. And then they've been they're very forward-thinking in the way they develop, and they've been creating microservices with APIs. But they're going to have to look at breaking down the big monolith as well. Here we go. Let me hand you over to Marcus so he can tell you a bit about the value stream mapping.
Yes, so when we first go into customers and look at these projects, we need to know what we're working with and why we're going to do what we're going to do. Yeah, we go in to get a case study out of it, okay, and to prove the technology works and to feed back to engineering. So at the end of it, we need to look back at that original state and go, why do we make those choices? So what we do, we go in and do value stream mapping. Has anybody come across value stream mapping? Yeah, so we look at the value stream as, from idea to production, and that value is achieved when it's in production. And how do we remove any bumps in the road in the way to ensure we can make that journey as smooth and as quickly as possible? So the first thing we do when we get the customer to map out their steps in the development process. Well, not just the development process. We go all the way back to the sales cycle in this instance. So up here you can see there's a sales opportunity all the way to getting into production. And we get the customer to map all that out and draw it up on the whiteboard. So you can see here we've got the dev cycle is starting to be built out. And that's all retrospective. It's very much a fact-finding exercise. So a lot of people in the room who are new to the Numero product, we're also learning about it as we go. Okay. We don't allow any talk of the future, which I always find very hard, because people want to talk about containers, app services, this, that, the other. The purpose of this is to do a retrospective, say how are we at the moment and what can we work on to improve. Okay. So once we have this process all mapped out and we look at the process time, how long does each stage take, who's involved, we start identifying waste. So we give people a red pen and they go and identify waste. We have different types of waste. You can see them on the board over there. Things like, is there any heroics where one person is relied on to carry out a process? Or have we got builds that are failing? Or have we got long delays waiting for something to finish before we can start the next stage? Okay. So we start to map all that and we'll look a bit more detail at some of these issues in the future. There was quite a lot of waste. Okay. People were keen to use the red pen quite a lot. You can see, especially in the build and test process up here. There's a lot of areas identified for improvement. It's very important to be open. Okay. A no blame culture when we're doing this exercise. And then, the time everybody's been waiting for, the green pen. So people write down ideas on how they can help remove these areas of waste. Okay, so we had all sorts of different suggestions. Obviously, people came with preconceptions on what they wanted to do, but we're trying to say, look, think of everything. Okay, containers not necessarily the way we want to go. What other options have we got? We talked about IaaS, we talked about platform as a service. Okay, so at the end, it looks a bit like this. Okay, and all this is actually online on a case study, which I'm not sure if the URL's in the deck, but we should put it on the end. So this is all available online if you want to look at it more closely. But we can see on here, we've got a point here, you can see from the sales opportunity, proof of concept, planning, development. You can see some areas have got a lot more information than others. That's based on who's in the room. It's really important to try and get a wide range of people in the room. Support was very thin on the ground. We didn't have anybody from support in there. But as you can see, lots on dev, which, to be honest, we're going and working with the dev team and release. So that's the main information we want to capture. A few issues we identified. Issues can be introduced a long time before technology gets involved. So there was one feature it took a long time to release. How long was it? Was it like 3 or 4 months? It was months, wasn't it?
It was months. But we worked out that it was actually infinity for some customers as well. Yeah,
look. So this feature took ages to develop. And the issue was the salespeople had sold it without speaking to anybody technical. Yeah, they sold a massive contract and gone, right, we need this feature. We've got someone to go and build out a proof of concept. So the term used, I think it was Chris, was it? Used the term, yeah?
It was me.
It was you, was it, actually? Yeah, not on the lorry. Yeah, it should have never been suggested in the first place. Okay, which I thought was quite interesting. Multiple manual deployments. So the deployments we start to identify when they're coming to do, just the developers deploying, test deploying, they were doing those deployments manually, because there's so many different moving parts and things, provisioning multiple VMs. I think it was 6, 7, 8. Every sprint, I think it was about 8 or 9 different machines built with manual steps. Some of it was automated, but there's still manual tweaking need to happen. And it also meant lots of waiting in there, and we can see, all the Git pushes and things, lots of waiting for people, issues with package managers, waiting for tests to complete, and the build. And we did jump into the build a bit more. So a build typically took build and tests about 8 hours. Okay, obviously not ideal, but then they end up actually failures are quite common. Okay, so in reality, they get in the next morning, so leave it running overnight, they kick it off again because it's failed. So it can be 16 hours if you're lucky, for it to actually successfully complete. Why was this? Lots of redundant tests. Things that probably aren't needed anymore. Tech debt. that they've just never been given the time to resolve. And queue builds, hardware bottlenecks. So builds were queuing up. Okay. You see there's lots of areas that we potentially work on. So we can see the waste identified and then potential solutions. Yeah, come to the deployment stage. It's all happening with copy and paste over RDP. Bearing in mind a lot of this is on customer sites. You know, RDPing onto machines because that's the access they have. And running scripts, copying and pasting. I don't need to tell you guys, that's going to, inconsistencies. It comes back to Jeffrey this morning, consistency. Copy and paste isn't consistent. One site uses Octopus, but others couldn't. Multiple customers means multiple deploys. I think there was 30 different sites with 60 different versions of the application being deployed. Okay, all slightly differently. And the other interesting thing, we're talking about how long does it take people to get value. People only got the latest version of the software if they paid for it. Okay, so some people are on years old versions of the software. So I sort of said, well, actually, the time, to get for that customer to receive the value that you're working on, it's infinity. It's never going to happen if they're not going to pay. Which also meant the guys at Numero are having to maintain X different versions of the software. Okay, not great. Sounds a bit like Windows, doesn't it? XP, Vista, and everything. Let's get everybody on the same one. Over to Alex.
Cheers. Yeah, so you've seen our value stream map. You can see a lot of requirements we didn't know we had that came up during that exercise. But we actually did have a bit of a steer from our top brass as well. Our CTO had asked us to create something that would be portable. Therefore, we'd be able to have it on-prem, have it on Azure, possibly on a different cloud platform. We wanted to be able to push and update once to all live instances. Of course, we don't want to push 60 different ones. We wanted to be able to quickly replicate any of our bespoke customer solutions because you can imagine I showed you all different Numero customers. Each one of them has got a really different configuration and different components involved, different versions of the components. So they call up with a problem. We can't access their version of that solution, but we'd really like to be able to just go click, spin up some VMs, click, deploy the software. Now we're looking at the same thing that you are. See the problem, no, yeah, we'll fix it, As from a support perspective, that would be amazing. And for, developing new features as well. We wanted to be able to design a methodology for Numero which would work for decisioning and also a couple of other products we have called Public Sector and Open Banking, Aspire View. Those are some of our other similar systems that we have. We wanted it to be able to scale out on demand. Imagine a lot of our customers are retail customers. Black Friday, Boxing Day. We want to be able to have something that responds to demand. And we want it to be resilient. We want to be able to see it responding to a problem and self-healing. I know this is a long list of things we want to do. But of course, that portability as well, that would mean that if one of our deployment methods went up the creek, we'd be able to just throw it out onto a different platform. So these are the other things that we were wanting to address. And containers, of course, just seems to be the most obvious way of deploying something reliably to all these disparate environments. Now we can have a good old discussion with that a bit later, maybe. But yeah, we were, as Marcus said, we were very, very keen because of this to try containers. And it just made more and more sense the more we looked at the delivery stream. So, yeah, we also had a bit of a bias towards trying VSTS. Marcus was very open-minded about what solution we should use.
So they're using Jenkins. The purpose of us going and doing this project was to get good open source case studies of open source technologies being used with Azure. And then they're saying we want to use VSTS. And I'll be honest, I said, well, can we not use Jenkins? Let's use Jenkins. I love VSTS, and personally I'd rather use it day in, day out. But if the people working there were using Jenkins, I said, look, let's stick with it. But
you can come. We've got plenty of Jenkins going on. Both for our data products, we've got a lot of test suites running in Jenkins, and at Numero they're still using Jenkins for all their builds. So you can come and play with that rat's nest anytime you like. It's, you know, when something's been innovated and innovated and innovated, it's just got bigger and bigger and bigger. They've been using the particular Jenkins setup for years, and it's exciting to look at. So yeah, these are the reasons we wanted to use TFS for this. We use TFS in-house already for the core data products at Callcredit, and so we're trying to integrate Numero to using similar practices because they're very, very good at innovating. And I say they're really good at doing dev rather than DevOps because they use all the tools and they're really enthusiastic, but they don't actually have a full delivery pipeline view necessarily. So wanting to push them towards more of a DevOps than just dev.
Yeah, one thing to point out when we did value stream mapping, I wanted them to, what open source projects are you using? I said lots. I said, well, can you list them? List them. They got to about 20 and they were still going. I said, how many? There was about 200. So stop there. So that's sort of the scope of different things we're being used in this product.
Well, that's it. There's really good guys who are just absolutely joyful about using all the things, and we need to just rein it in a little bit so that we can make sure that it's operable. So yeah, we wanted to have a cloud service because I mentioned they're in Stockport, we're based in Leeds. We've got teams in London, in Kaunas, Lithuania, in Poland, all sorts. So having a cloud service makes absolute sense, and there's a strong push internally to evaluate VSTS being the natural successor possibly to TFS. We like the idea that the updates and everything will be handled by Microsoft and we don't have to worry so much about that. And of course VSTS gets the newest technology earlier than TFS. So I'll let Marcus tell you a little bit more about that.
Who uses VSTS, TFS at the moment? Few people, not many. So those aren't aware of the difference. So Visual Studio Team Services, you saw Sam talk about earlier, continuously delivered. Updates come out very frequently. TFS is less frequent. I think it's quarterly releases or something like that. Then updates come out periodically with updates packaged together. Okay, so that's the difference. Team Foundation Servers on-prem, Visual Studio Team Services in the cloud. What's it do? Now, I get shot for saying this at DevOps meetups, but I like to say it's DevOps in a box. Okay, from a tool, from a DevOps tools point of view, I can say, from a tools point of view, it's got lots of features in there, all in one place that you can make sure everything's in one place and get you up and running really quickly. Some of the Kanban and tracking, project tracking things, source code, so you've got Git in there, Git integration in there, or you can integrate out with GitHub, package management. So there's all these different package management tools, but now VSTS has its own package manager in there. Cross-platform, it's not just Windows. Okay, so somewhere like Numero, I think it was all mostly Windows, wasn't it? Yeah, there's some other technology, non-Microsoft technologies, such as the Java stuff on Tomcat that need to be worked with. Release management, there's lots of nice features in there. So that's, for those of you who aren't aware of what VSTS is, that's what it is.
Awesome. So between our value stream mapping exercise and our actual 3 days we booked for the hackathon, we had a couple of weeks just to sort ourselves out and get prepared. So, of course, what we did was think, right, what's the smallest viable set of components that we could have that would enable us to run something that is Numero? So that turned out to be the database, the core services component that I showed you before, which is the big monolith, their original product, and the identity component as well, the one that obviously validates your access to it. And what we did as well is we took Numero's existing installers and we, the system build team who aren't part of Numero or weren't part of Numero, we took all that and tried to install it from scratch. And so we really lived through the complexity of installing it. We've got an 80-page manual on how to install it. And yeah, some of that was, lots of pictures, but it was very complicated. And but it helped us to understand it, confirm the prerequisites, and from there we then created a pipeline in Octopus Deploy. Creating that pipeline meant that we were writing the PowerShell scripts to automate a lot of that deployment, which we were then going to use in the hackathon. Made the whole job a lot more speedy. Set up a sandbox in Azure so that we'd have a space to play in. We set up an instance of VSTS, just again a sandbox that we'd be able to use for the hackathon. And in the meantime, the Numero guys got busy importing all of their code into VSTS in preparation. So, Marcus, I'll hand back to you.
Yep.
Oh, you don't need that.
I just need the pointer. Yeah, so it was actually cool that the team put in so much effort before the hack, because the hack, I think it was 3 days or 4 days?
3 days.
3 days. So it's not a lot of time that we had to do this. Yeah, so it was really great. They all jumped in and were keen to give all this a try. People had never used VSTS before, got their Git, got everything pushed up into Git on VSTS. So when we, got ready to go, we hit the ground running. So this is us in Leeds, working on the hack. Full long days. We all got to know each other pretty well. So there's all different people from different parts of the team there. So what were the aims? Okay. As far as the technical aims, build the 3 components we're going to use in the hack in VSTS. Okay, these Jenkins builds were taking 8 hours. If we've got 3 days and we're waiting for 8 hours for a build, not going to work, is it? So we just need to get them building. Okay, and then look at release. And the things in release, containers, we talked about that. Wanting to have a look at how we can have test environments and live environments, so a sample of switching from testing to production or live. And how do we release these containers onto Azure? It's all very well using containers on your local machine, but we need to get them into the cloud. And also monitoring. Let's not forget that. It's an important piece. It's all very well playing with these tech, but we need to look after it once it's in production. So the first thing we did was Azure Dev Test Labs. I don't know if anyone's come across this. So it's a service on Azure, and it gives developers a sandbox to run VMs in. So you can specify a dev test lab, and you can schedule things like auto shutdown. Okay, so everyone got a development machine in the cloud. Okay, create some virtual machines. You choose a base image. Okay, now everyone wanted Visual Studio Enterprise 2017, the latest version, and because it needs to be on server 2016. Okay, I'm trying to think, why did we 2017? There's some reasons. Was some of the Docker integration people wanted to use and things like that. Okay, and you give it a public IP. And we also specify an automatic deletion time. So at the end of the hack, I think the week after or something, they're all specified to delete and go. Choose the size of the VM that everybody's going to get. Okay. And we can select which artifacts are going to be pre-installed on this VM. So when people, it's like self-service, when they provision their VMs, they get a number of artifacts on there, such as Firefox. Okay. Chocolatey. Go ahead, Peter. You can do it in an ARM template, Azure Resource Manager template. I doubt there's Terraform support for it, but you could use an ARM template to do it. Underneath, these are PowerShell scripts. Okay, in the Linux world, there's shell scripts. So you can just list your Chocolatey packages, and it uses Chocolatey to pre-provision. And we create formulas. So a formula is a combination of a basis VM image plus a number of artifacts. Okay. But the key thing that was missing, so that's when we provision it. The key thing that was missing was Docker. So there's some images of Docker on Windows Server 2016 on the Azure Marketplace we could have used, but they didn't have Visual Studio 2017. Okay, so we had the choice. We could install all the Visual Studio and dev tools from scratch, or we could install Docker from scratch. So I decided, let's install Docker. So I created an artifact. It's all an open source project, the artifacts on Dev Test Labs. I created a PowerShell script, created a pull request, and the product team have pulled it up into the portal. So if you now go and deploy Dev Test Labs, you can see this Docker artifact for Windows Server 2016, which I developed a couple of days before the hack. Okay, so we can add that artifact and you get Docker Engine on there. Containers. I don't think we need to talk about this too much, but obviously we've got Windows Server and Linux containers. This was very early days with Windows Server containers. Lots of things didn't work. I was aware of lots of bugs, but not necessarily how to fix them. Okay.
But it was amazing when we discovered them to see, we were sending the information about what didn't work back to Microsoft, and, in an hour or so we were getting a message back saying, try it again now. Yeah. Really, really working with us.
So it's quite lucky. I got links both into the Windows Server guys, and also Elton at Docker I had him on Slack as well. Saying, look, have you seen this before? So, the idea is to use Azure Container Registry as our image repository. And push all our images up there. Those who aren't familiar with containers and why containers are great for DevOps, because the developers can build them, push them up to the repository. Ops can look after deploying them or automate the deployment of those containers. Any issues, report back to the developers, who then iterate new version of the image and gets deployed. So containers really do work well in a DevOps scenario. So these are the components that we decided to work on the hack. Identity manager and database, not too much of a problem, and we'll have a look at the Docker files in a moment. We didn't need all these other microservices, but the key big monolith, this core services, had all sorts in it. This had Tomcat running, IIS running, with Java, .NET, all sorts of random bits of code. First thing we did, we created our own image with IIS and .NET installed, and you can see on here, just using the PowerShell in the Docker file, so we're running, executing the PowerShell to install the required features. This wait service.ps1 monitors IIS. If IIS stops, it'll restart it or terminate the container.
Is that a Windows Server core pre-2016, or is that 2016?
So the question was, is this Windows Server Core pre-2016? For containers, it only exists in Server 2016, so this is Windows Server Core on 2016, which is a pretty hefty image, to be honest, so the first download takes a while.
Because I thought the Windows feature names changed. Sorry, this is kind of the orthogonal to the...
Yeah. Yeah. It worked. Yeah, and then also, so we were going to use that image a few times for a few different of these services, and then for the core service, I did this in a separate image because of the amount of time it takes to build and people wanted to test it and things. We installed Tomcat, Java, and IIS. Now, Alex pointed out they did a lot of work on the PowerShell scripts beforehand because that was really important to enable us to achieve things on the hack quickly. So we could just use the script they created, copy that into the container, and run it. Done. Nice and easy. Exactly the same as they did on a physical server. Yeah, and then it got, based off that, we've got this core services. So there's 3 different sets of artifacts we're copying in there. Again, there's a DNS bug in Windows Server. This took a little while with some help from Elton and things. There's a registry edit you could get to. DNS resolution won't work between containers on Windows Server. I think that's now fixed. And again, the bulk of it is this script here. Install.ps1. That did the whole installation, exact same way as I've done on the VM. So when we go and do these projects, I always say, have you got scripts? And if not, they need to get scripts. And if they have, great. As long as those scripts work, the journey should be relatively straightforward. Yeah, Node.js on IIS, so one of these services or containers needed Node.js. See, we're downloading this is the rewrite module, IIS rewrite module. Okay, installing that and installing Node for IIS. Just using the standard MSIs. There's nothing, although it's containers, just the same things we do normally. Okay. SQL Server. So data is an interesting one when it comes to containers because containers really should be stateless. Okay. If you're on Azure, use something like SQL Azure, use a SQL Server on-prem. But for development purposes, people all needed their own copy of the database in SQL. So we created a container with SQL Server Express on there. Okay, which meant everyone who was developing could just pull that image down, run it, and they've got the database in there ready to go. So that was, the Docker files. Obviously, the amount of time I've talked about it there, it took a little bit longer to create all these and work out some of the bugs and glitches. But we did get there. Nginx. Yeah, so they're using Nginx on Windows as a proxy. Yeah. So yeah, again, Docker file to configure all that. So using that for SSL offload was the main reason for using Nginx, I believe. Yeah, build.
Yeah, so we mentioned before that Numero had really, really slow builds, and that was mainly because of this massive legacy of tests, which they're now dealing with. So we just decided to run the whole thing from scratch. Told you about why we wanted to do VSTS, so this is how we did it. It's so easy. I think probably most of you have had a good look at this already, but you can just pull in the tasks that you want to reduce scripting. Of course, we had some scripts already that we were able to just pull in grunt build steps where appropriate as well. We did have a couple of basic tests in there, and we just flagged it to continue on error there. And just put Docker tasks in. I'm sorry, I've overlaid that a little bit. You can't quite see that bottom step there. It says push an image. And once the build is complete, it was going to push our image up to the appropriate repository. So one thing that we absolutely loved when we first looked at this, which actually isn't here, is the fact that in VSTS we could create the build machine and actually the machine to which the code will be deployed as well as part of the build. So it was possible to, and you could kill those machines off at the end after you'd run your tests and stuff as well, so we absolutely loved that. We haven't used it here, but I wanted to mention it. Yeah, so just a little bit of a drill down here. You can see that we had to just put in the path to the Docker file. And we had, in this case, we tagged the version with build.buildid. And we qualified the image name by prefixing it with the registry name as well. To push the image up to the container registry, as you can see there, you just name your registry connection. You want to push the image, you reference which image it is, qualify the image. Now this tag with latest we wouldn't use in production, but for the hack we just wanted the latest one. So
yeah, because you should, if someone's going to modify a container image and they modify latest, which is the default with no tag on a container, you don't know what they're going to modify in production. So when you're deploying in the real world, you should always tag your images with version numbers, the build IDs, which was what was there as well, but just to make things quick on the hack, everyone could just pull the latest containers.
So this made us very happy, as you can imagine. It's great that we could just see the full logs for each stage as well. We could see, well, obviously before it went green, we wanted the logs were even more useful. But it was good to be able to see every single step that had occurred there. You could see our test results as well, and whether it's deployed to the right repository. And we had all smiles and thumbs up all around when we got all our builds going green. I mean, you can imagine, can't you? We were rushing to move these things which had never been built in this way before. The fact that the components built correctly was wonderful. And this was quite early in the hack as well, so we felt quite pleased. Okay, Marcus, hand over to you to talk about some release.
Yes, so release, what platform we're going to deploy it on. Now, bear in mind we had 3 days. Okay, nobody had much Docker knowledge, I'd say, other than perhaps myself. So we decided to use Docker Compose and Swarm. Main reasons being people had a single VM. You know, we weren't provisioning clusters. You know, we hadn't really got a lot of time to get into provisioning clusters. People wanted to be able to test it on their local machines. Okay, and a lot of the customers have very small deployments. Okay, maybe deployed onto a single VM, and they don't want to be managing lots of VMs. So that was the initial thinking, and I think Alex will expand on that a little bit more later. But the other thing is Swarm provides a Windows-only solution. You know, Callcredit, pretty much a Windows shop. There's some Linux stuff in there. But you can run Swarm just on pure Windows with no Linux orchestrators. If you use something like Kubernetes, you need some Linux orchestrators in there. What's in the Compose file? So those of you aren't familiar with Docker Compose, it includes details of the images, what ports are going to be mounted. Okay, any environment variables are going to be passed in, so that could be customer-specific data is passed in there. Dependencies, so which containers need to spin up first and which are dependent on each other. And the network they're connected to. Okay. Yeah, so we deployed using VSTS once the build's complete. So this is the live environment. Obviously, it's a hack, so it's not quite like you would do it in production. But you can see the Docker Compose commands being run. We weren't using Swarm at this point. It was just done on a single machine. Swarm wasn't named. But if you're using Swarm, you'd use Docker deploy. We also created some tests using Selenium to run on these, because it's a web-based application. So once that fired up, Selenium was running some tests just to prove it could be done. Okay, and we just had 2 environments, a test and a live environment for the purpose of the hack. Proof of concept, show what could be done if we spend more time. Yeah, and we got release triggers. So release actually triggered release on every time the Compose file was updated. Okay. Rather than the build of components, because the issue was these builds were being troubleshooted. We didn't want deployments happening all the time. So in the hack, we just triggered when we updated the Compose file. So we had the image numbers tagged in there manually initially. You know, we just change the image numbers and redeploy. Okay. we've got triggers for each environment. So if it gets into test successfully and deploys and the test pass, it'll automatically deploy into live.
This was so exciting. Every time something worked, we just got really, really happy. So yeah, Numero worked. There it was, running in containers.
Not straight away. Go on, let's tell the truth.
I'll qualify it in a second,
Okay.
Marcus. Let me have my little moments. We had those 3 components running in containers. Clearly, it's not ideal to have the database in a container, but we shoved it in there anyway. We were happy with the containers. But that's what Numero looks like when it's fully configured. We hadn't actually put a full configuration on it. It was a vanilla one. So the way we could tell it was running was using the Microsoft Operations Management Suite. So we could see, you can't quite see from the background there, but we were able to see all the containers running, how many virtual machines were up there. And so it was collecting logs from all the hosts, and we were able to see exactly what was happening in real time. And we use Elk Stack for all our other products, so we were quite interested to see that we could then export the logs from here into Elk as well, so we could have like a single display of everything. So yeah, what it really looked like was more like this. I'll just click through very quickly because I want to have time for questions. So we just had very vanilla screens, but just imagine how happy we were and just clicked on stuff and it was working, you know. Our little adventure into containerisation had essentially worked. And it took us a few more days actually. We ended up putting all of the components that you saw on one of those diagrams earlier, we put them all into containers. It didn't take more than a couple more weeks, just, you know, sort of spare time messing about. So this is actually one of the newer components we ended up getting working as well. So that was after the end of the hack, so we were cheating a little bit. But
there was a file permission issue in one of the containers. I spent ages. I was sat in the pub on the last day, on the evening, having a drink. I was still trying to fix it. I couldn't work out how it was, but luckily the guys at Numero a couple of days later, they realised there was a permissions issue in one of the web directories, and that was they added a line into the container and fixed it, and it all came to life.
So we ended up with everything running up there. But it's just a proof of concept. We could see that this would work. We could see why it would work. But, of course, there's post-hack. We had a lot more work to do. It was just the beginning. So we mapped out everything we'd done. Seen a lot of those screenshots that we've had earlier in the presentation. That was stuff that we just captured so that we had an aide-memoir so that we could destroy the environment later and still have it all. We scripted it out because, of course, you can automatically generate ARM templates from Azure. Shouted about it a lot, as we're doing today. And we began investigating orchestration. So, first of all, we started looking at Kubernetes, and we used Azure Container Service to do that. We had interesting results. We're not quite ready to actually use that in Anger yet. But all of this, it's being improved and developed all the time. So actually, I'm going to go home and re-watch Marcus's presentation that he just did before this and just try everything that he did. Just to...
I've had a couple of demo fails.
Yeah, it's going to work when I do it. It's fine. Nobody will be watching. So, it just remember those requirements that we had at the beginning. We wanted it portable. We wanted to be able to push the update once, etc., etc., etc. So, some of these things, of course, the fact that we just put it into containers will satisfy that. But we've got a bit more work to do before it's going to be auto-scaling, it's going to be self-healing, all that sort of thing. And of course, we've got to prove it deploying onto other platforms as well. We're getting there. So the next steps, we've basically revisited that whole value stream mapping with Numero, and they've pulled out lots and lots of stuff that they could do with sorting out before we actually containerize it for production. Obviously, they're looking at all the snags in their delivery process. That monolith needs to go down to microservices, and they're just getting to a point in their work stream where they can do that. The database needs re-engineering because, there's lots of things about it, but including keeping config in the database. And of course, they're going to rationalise that enormous test suite that was taking 8 hours. So yes, as soon as they've addressed that, we're going to try redeploying the Numero solution containerized and automated onto Azure. Then we're going to try it onto another platform as well, just to prove that portability. In the meantime, we're going to have the delivery teams working on making the config deliverable, probably via Octopus, because that's our preferred deployment tool for the rest of the company. But we're flexible about that, as long as it's got the right division of responsibilities and security around it. And of course, we're also working with Decision Metrics, one of our other software products, to containerize theirs as well. In fact, we're going to start that next week. Thank you very much for listening to this. Are there any questions at all? We've got a couple of minutes. 1 minute. 4 minutes.
You mentioned logging, which is through quite a few different containerization logs. I think this is today. The first person to mention it. How do you get the logs out?
The question is, how do you get the logs out? We haven't actually extracted them yet.
So what you talk about, so the running containers, so Docker, you can look at the Docker logs. So if you have an agent running on the host, that can use the Docker log commands and pull the logs from the Docker containers from inside the containers and send them back to whatever logging platform you use.
There's a tool called NXLog that works well here. There's also a tool like Telegraph.
There's a few. Yeah.
And also file leaks for
Yeah.
Elasticsearch.
Yeah. Yeah. So CoScale, you come across CoScale? They have a good container logging and monitoring platform. Operations Management Suite and the container plugin for that. Yeah, there's quite a few out there, but they all do the same sort of thing: pull the logs from the containers and send them back.
You're in Azure, is that correct?
Yeah.
Is there any reason why you're not using OMS rather than Callcredit?
So it's historically, isn't it? So for the hack, we used OMS, Operations Management Suite, and they looked at exporting the logs from OMS into Elk because they've got so many other. Talk about Elk.
Yeah, when we did the hack, it was just convenient because we were using the hack as an opportunity to learn about VSTS and Azure as much as we were about the containers, because this is all quite new to us. So we basically just checked. We were looking at the Operations Management Suite just to make sure that it was working, but also we just checked that we looked at the method of deployment. I'm sorry, I've slept a couple of times since I can't remember the exact method of how it extracted, but it was going to work quite well.
There's a lot of existing systems logging into an Elk stack. Okay, other products and things, hence the operations team were keen to have it surfaced in Elk.
Yeah, we do love Elk. All our product teams have got their own dashboards, and so that's their real-time view of how their code's actually working in production, which is it's really, really good. And it makes me really happy to see that now, because that's quite a recent thing that we managed to get them all engaging with that side of it.
So, sorry, just to follow up. So you're quite reactive to what you see on the dashboards rather than being proactive in trying to say something off. Obviously, you've still got your scalability to work out.
Yeah. Well, we're moving with... Is that with the containerized trial or with our other products? We're quite reactive, or we have been quite reactive up to a point. But the fact that the devs now can see everything running in live, and in fact we've got for some of the products we've got like yesterday's data being played through again in pre-prod, and so they can play a little bit more with that. Obviously, they're not allowed to touch pre-prod. This all has to be automated. It's treated like live, but the fact that they have those dashboards where they can see both live and pre-prod, and in fact DR, they can really look at where there are snags and try and tailor their code so that those snags are gradually ironed out. So they've been moving from reactive to proactive the more they've got interested in developing their own dashboards and analysing the way stuff's actually running in real time. So it's quite an exciting evolution that they're going through now. Not all teams are doing it, but we're getting there. Okay. Are we out of time? Okay. Come and talk to me a bit.
Yeah.
Or him.